May 21st, 2019. My Tableau perspective began to take a monumental shift. Because on that day, I had my meeting with Doreen from Tableau, who puts together these fabulous conferences every year. And our meeting was to discuss what I would be presenting at this year's conference, essentially what I would be presenting before you all here today. And so to that meeting, I brought with me my portfolio of dashboards that I've built throughout my last 5 years using the product. Dashboards that were very technical, some with advanced calculations, parameters, varying levels of detail. Some dashboards that were refined over weeks and months. Some that were pretty good looking dashboards. And these dashboards, they spanned my 5 years in using Tableau through departments such as information security, application testing, and cyber resiliency, and currently data risk. And so it didn't take long in our meeting before Doreen suggested that I present today on my control testing dashboards. I didn't even really get to take out many of those other dashboards before that was suggested, because she had seen that I presented these dashboards earlier in the year at a Tableau and Schwab joint meeting. But I left that meeting with Doreen and I was wondering, with all those other advanced dashboards, why did she suggest that I present on these? Although I am really excited to present on them, because these dashboards, they don't use a lot of fancy features or advanced features. And to be honest with you all, they were built in no more than 2 or 3 hours. In fact, I had put in a regular day at the office because I can remember back when I built them, had dinner with my family that night, put the kids to bed. And normally this is the part in the story where I would say, don't judge me, but I know you're all my data friends and family, so I'll admit that I like to use Tableau in my free time and to decompress and relax. So I opened up Tableau that night, and in no more than 2 or 3 hours before I went to bed, I put together these dashboards. And so then fast forward to August when I began to prepare this presentation for you all today. And I started working on the presentation with one of my teammates who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but she put a lot of time and effort into this presentation, so thank you very much, Chantal. I know you're watching on the live stream today. But so Chantal and I, we were working on today's presentation and the materials, and then it hit me that these are the perfect dashboards to present at a Tableau conference, because these show just how powerful and mighty Tableau can be, where you can take Tableau and literally overnight change a process or project within your organization and make a major impact. So with that said, I'd just like to welcome everyone to today's presentation. My name's Jason Eisman. We're going to be talking about how we've leveraged Tableau within corporate risk management at Charles Schwab, as well as how we run, manage, and engage our amazing Tableau user group. For today's agenda, first we're going to begin with some introductions for Charles Schwab and corporate risk management. Then we're going to talk about the internal control testing project where those dashboards were created based off of that story that I just told you all. After that, I have an issues dashboard that I'd like to show you. And then we're going to talk about how we've been able to use and scale Tableau at Charles Schwab. And finally, and this is a good one, I'm going to share with you all the secrets to how we run, manage, and engage the user group at our firm, because that's really blossoming. So if any of you are leading a user group or looking to stand one up, that'll be a good part to stick around for. And maybe we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So you're probably wondering who I am. My name is Jason Eisman, and I'm the senior team manager of the Data Risk Management Testing and Monitoring Team, or the DREAM team, as we use as our acronym. I've been working with Charles Schwab for 9.5 years out of the Orlando, Florida office. I've been using Tableau and Alteryx for 5 years now. And during those 5 years, I've also served as a leader for both our Tableau and Alteryx user groups. I'm married to my lovely wife, and together we have 2 young sons, ages 5 and 2, named Jay and Kai, just like the Lego ninjas. I'm a knight from the University of Central Florida, and a fun fact about me is that my favorite word is automation. And it's a great day to be alive with all the breakthroughs in automation today, both at home and at work, because depending on which voice assistant we're using, we can just say a few magic words. And I won't say them now because I don't want to set off everyone's phone in this room, as fun as it may be. But we could say those magic words and we can change the temperature in our house. We can start up our Roomba to clean up after the kids made a mess at dinner. And I think my wife's watching on the live stream right now, so I'll admit it's often me making the mess at dinner that I need to start up that Roomba. And then at work, we have tools like Alteryx and Tableau to make our lives easier. One thing I'd like to share, because I know it's after lunch right now, would like to get everybody fired up. It's after lunch here in Vegas, and probably for those of you who have joined us on the live stream, thank you all for your support. So I'd just like to share with you before we go into the rest of the presentation, something that we say at UCF, which is charge on. And when we say charge on, we're making a commitment, and we use those words as a catalyst to wake up every day and try our best, and to get smarter and stronger, and to rise up and be efficient and overcome our goals and challenges. So if you all wouldn't mind, just stand up, even those of you watching on the webcam, and prepare a short celebration, maybe a fist pump or some thumbs up. Just be mindful of your neighbors. I know we have close confines here. And I'm gonna count down from 3, and it's Friday, we're in Vegas. Maybe we had some caffeine at lunch. Just give me your loudest charge on. 3, 2, 1. Charge on! Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. First, a little background on Charles Schwab. We are the nation's largest publicly traded investment firm. Our founder, Chuck Schwab, he's driven countless innovations and changes in the investment industry to help us get here, including recently creating waves in the market by changing all of our fees and reducing the commissions for stocks and ETFs to 0. We have a see through the client's eyes strategy. And what that means is that we put ourselves in our client's shoes to do what's best for our client, because at the end of the day, that ends up being what's best for everyone. And you may be familiar with our Own Your Tomorrow tagline, where we seek to partner with our clients and help them achieve better financial outcomes and to achieve their financial goals and dreams. Because those goals and dreams that we have, they're all real, and they mean a lot to me personally. And so when we partner with our clients, we feel the same way. Maybe that financial goal is putting our Lego ninjas through college, or saving up for retirement, or paying for our house or car. So it's very important to us. And the way we achieve that is through our Schwab values. Paramount to our Schwab values is trust. We seek to build and maintain client trust. And so when we think about that in terms of data, we want clients trust us with their personal information and with their financial goals and dreams. So we want to make sure that we protect that and build and maintain that they can trust us with those dreams, since they mean so much. We also seek to drive innovation and make changes, such as what I just mentioned, where all of our fees went down to 0 for the trading. We want to make sure that we're able to do what's best for our clients and help them out. We also believe in the power of teamwork. So a lot of other companies that I've worked at before, each department is seeking to do what's best for their individual department. But since at Schwab, we're all trying to do, at the end of the day, what's best for our client, we have what's called a One Schwab mantra. And so we all work together, all as one team. And finally, being good stewards of our brand and of our stockholders and shareholders. Because if we don't stay strong and take care of ourselves, then we can't be strong and take care of our clients. And we accomplish that by seeing through the client's eyes. In corporate risk management, as Schwab grows, we have greater responsibility. And so on this slide, make note of the 4 objectives that I'm going to present to you and their icons. Because these 4 icons, they're going to be used throughout the rest of today's presentation. You'll see them in the upper left-hand corner of each slide, depending on how the content of that slide relates back to our main objectives. The first objective that you'll see is represented by the two buildings here, and they represent our program. So in corporate risk management, we seek to build a program that can identify, monitor, and report on risk all across the firm. The light bulb is for efficiency. In order to monitor and report on our risk, we need to be efficient and use the latest tools, technology, and automation, and data analytics. The chat bubbles that you'll see, those represent awareness. So we seek to make sure that each business unit at the firm is aware of the risks that exist within their groups. So that way we can put in controls in place to prevent and detect those before they may have a client impact. And lastly, and probably most importantly, are our people who represent our risk culture. So not only do we want to make our business units aware, but we want each employee, especially ones that are interacting with our clients, to be aware of any risks so that way they can raise awareness, and we can put that into our program. Now we'll dive into the internal control testing project. And I'm going to start out with the value that Tableau brought to this project, which was monumental. So we had an internal focus last year to test over 1,000 controls across 53 different business units at our firm. And it required the coordination of over 6 testing groups. The return on investment through using Tableau was over 20 times the cost of the license. And in a 6-month period of time where we deployed Tableau for this project, we saved approximately 8,000 hours. And so before we go any further and dive into the dashboards, I just want to level set and make sure we're all on the same page as far as a few of the common terms that we'll be talking about today. Because I know in some cases we have an international audience, or these words may mean different things across different firms. So for today's project and presentation, when we talk about a control, we're talking about a process or action that's put in place to make sure that risk is mitigated in that area. We'll also talk about control testing. When we refer to that, we're talking about whether that control is designed and operating as it should be to mitigate the risk that it's in place for. We'll also talk about a tester, and the tester is the person or employee who's actually performing the control test. And we may see some control issues where if an employee identifies or a tester identifies that there's a gap or a need for remediation or a risk that needs to be addressed, we would create an issue and make sure that that way it gets the attention it deserves and therefore it can be remediated. Next, let's take a look at the data lineage for the control testing project. It all started out in our system of record, which is IBM Open Pages. That contains all of our control information and details. From IBM Open Pages, we would download reports in Excel with those controls and control details, and then we would add tester information, and I'll jump into a little more detail on the Excel file on the next slide. So we would add some additional information, and I'll show you that next. After that, we leveraged Alteryx. We used that for data prep to blend all those tracking files together and to perform all of our calculations. And we'll see that in more detail on an upcoming slide as well. And then from Alteryx, we leveraged the Publish to Tableau Server tool in order to push it directly to our Tableau server and be able to report on it through our various dashboards that you'll see momentarily. And so now I'm going to dive in and just show you so that way you understand where the information is coming from and what it looked like before we get to the dashboard, what our Excel files look like. I could get help from tech for a moment, I'm not getting the live file that I have on the screen here. Thank you. Yeah, I did. I switched from the. Apologies for the delay there, everybody, but I wanted to make sure you got what you paid for and we could get a live demonstration going here. So this is what the Excel file looked like that we pulled out from IBM Open Pages. So you'll see on the left side here, we have all the control details such as the enterprise business units and the control IDs in there. And we would assign testers to each of those controls, to whose responsibility it was to test each individual control. And then you'll notice in green over here, we added the 6 columns in green for each step in the testing process. So first we would have a kickoff meeting to let that business unit know that we were coming to test and not kind of do it discreetly or without their knowledge. Make sure that everybody's aware. And then we would request evidence. If we found any issues, we would communicate those issues to the business unit. And after that, we would finally report and have a close meeting on there. So each of these steps in the process, data validation was set up. So you'll see in my drop-down menu here, for example, if you were a tester and you were testing this specific control, you could come into the tracking file and you could update the status of your evidence request to maybe you didn't even start it. All the default values came in as not started. So if it was not started, then that step, we weren't quite there yet. And we'll use that in just a bit. But maybe you requested the evidence or you were pending receipt of the evidence. Likewise, for the kickoff meeting, there was data validation in the Excel file. Maybe the kickoff meeting was not yet scheduled or not applicable. So that's just to give you all a feel for where the data is coming from. And finally, over here on the right-hand side, these 3 columns, NOP, those are the results of the control test. So we would have a design, operating effectiveness rating, and final control rating. And just to note that this data is all mock-up data and isn't actually reflecting Charles Schwab current environment. So this was all created specifically for today's presentation. From the Excel files, if you remember our lineage, it then went into Alteryx for data prep. So this is not showing. Thank you. Sorry about the delay again. So if you think back to our lineage from Excel, we used Alteryx as the next step because we leveraged Excel to blend. We ended up with 24 different Excel tracking files like you just saw because there was one created for each enterprise and business unit. So there were 12 per quarter. So for Q3 2018, we had 12 different files. Those are what you'll see on the upper left-hand side of the screen. Down in the bottom were our Q4 files, another 12. And so Alteryx would blend together all of those Excel tracking files, which you could also use Tableau Prep in order to perform that functionality. And we would publish it to the Tableau server using the Publish to Tableau server tool in Alteryx. And we also took care of all of our calculations and data blending on the Alteryx side just to keep the load down from the Tableau server and to keep the dashboards running fast and efficiently. A couple key calculations in that Alteryx workflow, which this calculation could also be done on the Tableau side as well, is that we wanted to determine the latest status of each individual control test based on how each tester filled out that data validation within the Excel tracking files. So you'll see on the screen here now that calculation down there, it essentially works backwards. And remember I mentioned that each column was set by default to not started. And so if that step was not yet started, it would move backwards to the previous testing step to determine what the latest testing step was that that specific control was on. Once we had our latest status, we then worked with leadership to develop a completion key. We use this completion key in order to assign a completion percentage to each step in the control testing process. So you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see all the different steps in the process and a corresponding completion percentage. For example, the arrow is pointing now to the evidence status, which may have been pending receipt. Maybe we were waiting for evidence to come back that we requested from a particular business unit. So that control test would reflect 10% in the entire process. Similarly, if the closed meeting status was complete down here at the bottom, we would be 95% of the way through the process because all that was left was for us to have our closed meeting and let them know the results. Our final report was completed. And so that's where our progress dashboard was born. And this was born in order to provide leadership and control testers insight into the project without having to open all 12 or 24 Excel files. And so this is what our progress dashboard looked like. And again, this data, it doesn't reflect true data from Charles Schwab, but the first thing you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner of the screen is that it shows the total number of controls that are represented. So there's a filter set as well for Q3 2018. So that way we could gain visibility into one quarter at a time because the testing cycle would typically run on a quarterly cycle. So we could see Q3 or Q4 once the Q4 data was available. And so this dashboard, by having all of those filters up at the top, it could serve both executive leaders in the project as well as individual testers in order to determine what the status of the project was. For example, if you needed a high-level view of how is the project coming along, you could quickly determine here that there's a total of 579 controls being tested in Q3, and then an average completion percentage of 55.28%. So that's where we leveraged the completion key to determine an aggregate view of the completion percentage of the entire quarter by doing that for each individual control test. And if you were a leader of one of the testing groups, you could use the test group filter on the first line, second line, or third line. Because at Schwab, we have 3 lines of defense. And so I would filter for the second line group, and we could see how we were doing. If you were a manager in the project, which my manager viewed, you could use the reviewer filter because they were typically a reviewer, and they could filter for their name. And my manager at the time, because I was a tester in this project, they would provide leadership an update on the progress of their control tests every Friday morning. And so they could filter using the reviewer and see all of their employees' progress in the project. And as we look down, you'll notice a bar chart for our latest status. And that's where we kind of represent it's not necessarily a timeline, but it represents a timeline going from left to right, where we can see at the very left is the first step in the process, where you're at 0%, where the kickoff meeting is still being scheduled. And then all the way on the right, the final report has been sent. So if you were a manager in this project, you could look at these 5 that might be bringing down your overall completion percentage. And we leverage dashboard actions on here as filters. So that way you could click on these 5. And down here at the bottom, this is something I like to include on all of my dashboards, is a detail piece. It muddies up the dashboard a little bit because you have all that detail at the bottom, but I kind of keep it compressed and there at the bottom, so that way it doesn't take up too much space. And if someone's interested, they could scroll through there depending how many they are, or leverage the download feature on Tableau Server to download it into Excel or their platform of choice to review the individual details. So if I were a manager and I wanted to know why these 5 tests hadn't even had the kickoff meeting scheduled yet, I could filter there and I can see the individual testers on my team. Here I've got tester D. I've got tester D down here. And I could follow up with that person and ask them why the kickoff meeting was scheduled but hadn't been completed yet. And if I were an individual tester, like I was on the project, I wouldn't need to go through all 12 Excel files. I could just pull up tester E, and I could see my overall progress in the project. And then we had a bar chart on the right-hand side just to see the progress by each individual business unit. So that way we could identify down here, I'm not making a lot of progress with business unit UXF. They're only sitting at 10%. And again, there's dashboard actions set up for all of these visuals. So that way we can click on it and we can see that there's one kickoff meeting that's just scheduled, and that one's kind of bringing down my completion percentage for that particular business unit. Once we had the results of our control test, one challenge is that we had to communicate those results to the business units and let them know how their controls were rated. Remember, we got a preview in that Excel file on the design, operating, and final ratings of the control. So this is where it became a challenge, because we would need to explain to them, and I'm going to attempt to explain it to you now and then show you how much easier Tableau has made it. So when we test a control, first we perform a design assessment. And that design assessment is to determine whether the control is designed in a way that will actually mitigate any risk. For example, if there's a daily cash report that comes out, and a manager should probably review it every day, but a control is designed that a manager performs a weekly review of that daily cash report, it's not designed effectively. Similarly, we had an operating effectiveness rating. So the operating effectiveness rating is where we would actually look in practice, and that's where we would get evidence to verify that the control was actually working as intended. And an example of this one is that if you had that daily cash report and a control was designed where a manager was reviewing it daily, so it was designed well, but then you went in and you asked for evidence, and they provided you emails or some other evidence that they were actually only reviewing it every week, then it wasn't operating very well. So that was kind of the difference between the design and operating effectiveness test that we performed. And then the control would receive an overall final rating. And the final rating would be a combination of both the design assessment and operating effectiveness rating. And there was actually a rubric where the design assessment, the control could either be strong, sufficient, or weak. And then when we performed our operating effectiveness test, that would either pass or fail. And so we had a rubric, for example, if a control had strong design and it passed the operating effectiveness test, the final rating would be highly effective. But then we had a whole string of final ratings, right? Highly effective, effective, moderately effective, somewhat effective, or not effective. And to make it a little bit more confusing is that a tester, using their own judgment, could assign a final rating outside of the rubric. So I would have to explain all of that during these 53 business unit meetings every quarter, which you can imagine is quite difficult. And hopefully I did a good job explaining it here today. And so that's where our results dashboard was born. Yeah, it's not. Picking up where we left off, that's where our control testing results dashboard was born. And this made it much easier to communicate to the business unit during those closed meetings to explain just how their ratings fell as their controls were tested. So this one, most commonly, it still has all the filters on the top, but the most common filter that we use would be at a business unit level. You could still use the reviewer filter or tester filters up here in the upper right to see if you were a manager, what your employees were rating the controls, or if you were a tester like I was, you could pull up all the controls that you had tested and see their results. But it was most common that we would pull up this dashboard and we would filter it by business unit because the meetings were typically held at the business unit level. So for example, I just filtered it to business unit JRE, which are my initials because it's not real data. And we can quickly see on the right-hand side, there are two donuts here. And we have the control design rating and the operating effectiveness ratings represented by these donuts. And then in the main section of the page over here on the left are the final control ratings. So the control rating, you can quickly determine which ones were strong, sufficient, or weak by the green, yellow, or red. And then operating effectiveness, you can quickly see which ones passed or failed, because those were often questions that the business unit would ask us. And again, we used dashboard actions in order to filter the entire dashboard. So if they asked us, well, which of our controls failed the design rating, we could quickly click on this, and we could see that one control that we felt had weak design. And they would often ask us those questions on the call. So if we didn't have this dashboard, we would have to go rummaging through 12 or 24 different Excel spreadsheets to go gather that information for them, rather than having this pulled up right there on the screen. And that's where our control detail, again, is on the bottom. We could follow up if tester F were on the call or manager F were on the call. They could chime in and explain why that control failed the design rating. And the actions were set up similarly for the design effectiveness, or the operating effectiveness, excuse me. So if we wanted to see which ones failed, we could quickly click on that one and see how they laid out. And I'll give credit where credit's due, too. I have Jared sitting here in the front row who helped me to determine the best course of action on how to represent both the control design rating and an operating effectiveness rating all in one stacked bar chart. And so that's where we actually used, you can see this bar chart here, we have all the different ratings from highly effective down to not effective. And then you can see using this key which ones received a strong design rating with a pass operating rating. Some were strong and did not pass. Some were sufficient and pass, and those could be filtered and highlighted as well. And so that way our business units could see very clearly where their controls fell on the final rating scale. I need my tech friend again to get back to the PowerPoint. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. So picking back up where we left off, that was our results dashboard that we used to effectively communicate results both to the business units because we had to have those meetings with them, as well as our senior leadership who might wonder what the results were for the entire project or for different individual enterprises or business units. All those filters were there to kind of give that high-level view. And so what was the value of Tableau in this project, right? Before we had that manual Excel file review. And so we had a high time to insight. We would need to rummage through all of those individual Excel tracking files, 12, 24, 36. They were growing at increments of 12 every quarter. And we had to provide those manual point-in-time updates as our leaders asked us what the current progress was on the overall project or at the different levels that we were filtering on. And so after we leveraged Tableau, we had that executive level summary that it was updated every night while we were sleeping with the latest information and progress on the project. So our team and our leadership, when they got up in the morning and had their coffee, they would see the latest status of the project. Same with the results. We had workflow tracking across all of the enterprises and insight and analytics for all of the stakeholders involved. And so bringing that full circle back to our 4 objectives in corporate risk management, we were able to maintain that client trust through the control effectiveness testing, the overall project, which was enhanced and made better through the use of Tableau and identifying that risk for some of those controls that may not have rated so highly. We were able to innovate and get that tracking in place to help with our efficiency and not have people spending their time going through and reviewing all of those manual Excel files, which would have been a tall task. We raised awareness by partnering with our business units and not having to give all of those explanations verbally. We were able to show them those dashboards and paint a real clear picture to them using those dashboards to help raise their awareness of where risk was sitting within their business units. And finally, our risk culture. So not only did we partner with the business units overall, but with the control performers who actually perform those reviews day to day and who actually executed those controls that we were testing, as individual employees, they became aware of the importance of those controls, and through identifying and reporting on how effective they were, then they gained awareness in their day-to-day how to better protect our clients. And so at the end of the day, we had happy customers. And so now I'd like to leave some time at the end for Q&A, so I'm going to go really quickly through this, and I'm going to avoid switching to the live dashboard. So I'll go to the data lineage here, which is a little bit different. It still all started in IBM Open Pages. After that, we actually used UiPath. Not sure if any of you are familiar with that software. It's actually RPA software, which is robotic process automation software. And because our file drop for the control information that was used on the previous dashboards and data source, the issues that we created as a result of the testing, they weren't part of those data sources. So we actually had to send a robot using UiPath into the web user interface of IBM Open Pages to go and download a report onto our network folder each night, where we could then pick it up in, there's the Excel report, we could then pick it up in our Alteryx job and push that to the Tableau server. And so here again, I'm going quickly to leave us some Q&A time. This explains the UiPath component where we use those robots, and then we push it to Alteryx. Very similar to the previous one, we use that to perform calculations and publish it to the server. And then I'm not going to switch now, but I did leave backups in there of screenshots for us to talk about. So this, again, we use the filters at the top, the detail down on the bottom, and we use this issues dashboard to track issues that arise based on the results of our testing. So if we find a deficiency or a gap in a control test, we would go and create an issue in IBM Open Pages, and then once those issues are opened, they have certain due dates where they're due by the business. So on the left-hand side, we can see open issues that are kind of in their court and that they need to work on. And we have a timeline tracking on there as well, so we know when we need to follow up, maybe a week out when it's due. We can follow up with them and make sure that they're going to get it submitted on time, or if there's any hang-ups, we can help them through that. And then on the right side, we have our submitted issues. And our team, we use this every day, every morning. All the testing teams in our group, I do the data risk testing, but we have 5 or 6 other testing groups. And that subsource filter at the top, they can filter for their testing group. So I can filter for Dream Team, and I can see all the issues that are open, and then I can follow up with the business and find out when they plan on closing it. And then once it's submitted, the countdown starts on my clock, and our team needs to review everything that they've done to remediate it to determine if it was appropriate or not, so that we can close it out. And now let's talk about Tableau usage at Schwab. And this chart alone paints a huge picture, right? All the way on the left, we had our first user in 2008, and a decade is a relatively short journey. We're now up to over 750 Tableau desktop licensed users at the firm. Just tremendous growth and scale. And so I started using it around 2015. There were about 250 users. So huge growth even since I've started using it in 2015. And we're able to support and maintain that growth because we have a fabulous center of excellence. So shout out to Deepak and our COE team for all the work that they do. Day to day, they administer our server and take care of all of those things. They provide resources for us. Those resources are, we have a Charles Schwab preferences file that has our colors and fonts that are related to our brand in there, so we can quickly use those for our dashboards. So you may have noticed the branding in the dashboards that I showed to you previously. And then they support our Alteryx publish to Tableau server tool, so we can take data from across the firm and publish it right to Tableau for easy access. There's also been some great presentations if you're interested in how to set up and run a Tableau administration team, our very own Jessica Briggs-Sullivan, and that's Jessica with a G. Shout out to Jessica. She no longer works in the COE. She's in a different department, but she did a great job kind of building the Tableau empire at Charles Schwab. So the YouTube link is included in the presentation. She presented last year in New Orleans on how to build that. And then Brandon Fulton, he presented at the conference last year as well, along with Jessica. And I've actually reused some of Brandon's material in the past because he had a great concept where we have a design lab in our Denver office, and Brandon collected dashboards from different users around our user group from different departments, and he went around and got volunteers to go in behind one-way glass to be recorded and track mouse movements and answer questions using those dashboards to see how effective they were. And he was actually able to determine a lot of great Tableau best practices and design tips. So highly encourage you all, if you're interested in those things, to check out that presentation. Renee Kim, she's one of the leaders of our global data program. She spoke at last year's opening keynote. She gave a great presentation, some of what I told you today about Charles Schwab, and then how we're planning to take client data and use that to benefit our clients and how we protect it. And then Jessica, again, in 2017, she presented on the past, present, and future of Tableau usage at Schwab and how her Center of Excellence team at the time had built to maintain that Tableau scale and run the server and customer service and keep her clients happy. So highly recommend that one as well. Now we're going to talk about our Tableau user group. So our Tableau user group has really taken off and it's thriving. So if you're someone who, maybe you're thinking about setting up a user group or you're part of a user group leadership team, back in 2015, Jessica, who was our administrator at the time, and she still serves with us on our user group. She just no longer handles some of the administration, but Jessica sent out an email to all the Tableau users at the time. There were about 250 of us, if you think back to that chart and where it was at in 2015. And the email was asking for volunteers. Hey, who's really passionate about Tableau and wants to help run a user group where we're going to put on monthly meetings? And so I was new in 2015 to using Tableau, but I kind of raised my hand and volunteered to join the group and help out wherever I can. And I didn't know if I would make the cut because I figured out of the 250, maybe 40 or 50 people would raise their hand and sign up. But to my surprise, we had our first meeting in late 2015, and there were about 7 or 8 of us, which is the perfect amount of user group leaders, at least at our firm, I feel. And I'll never forget something that someone said on the call for that very first meeting, and I don't remember specifically who it was, but we were meeting in late 2015, and we were going to start our first user groups around February or March of 2016 to give us some lead-up time to prepare content for the first 2 or 3 user groups and give us some time to prepare. And someone said, I can see us pulling off 2 or 3 of these, but after that, I kind of feel like it's going to fizzle out. And everybody kind of paused on the call and digested it, and I was thinking, yeah, I kind of agree that this is going to be really difficult to provide value every month for a 1-hour call, which was the goal of our user group. But I'm happy to report that to this day, if I could go back to that call and tell everybody, I counted over 30 Tableau user group meetings that we've had now at Schwab, and we're continuing to grow. And Jared's sitting here. Come on up, Jared. I'll keep you up here for the Q&A. He's part of our amazing Tableau user group leadership team, and these are the secrets now for our user group. And the first one is that we want to, like Schwab, see through our clients' eyes and give value to our users. And so we present them the opportunity to present in a real-world session. And so for that real-world session, what that is we allow users across Schwab to sign up and come present dashboards or worksheets that they've built at the firm to showcase them to our users. And that's beneficial both ways because I'm always very eager to learn how others are using it at my firm and different groups with similar data sources and learn different data sources to use from them. And then it's also beneficial to our users because our leadership team, we meet with those users before they come present their dashboard, and they do kind of a dry run with us. We're able to give them tips and pointers and tricks on how to best present their dashboards, so they get better at presenting those dashboards, and it gives them practice in case they're going to present those to their leaders or in their organization. The next that we always try to provide is training. So we'll have different training topics that our user group leaders will take and run with and provide on the call. We also get great support from our Tableau representative, Kelly. She's the best. She's always able to get someone from Tableau to come join our calls every once in a while to present on certain topics. So we partner very heavily with Tableau in our user group, and she's part of our leadership team. We also do Viz contests, which, to be honest, have been a little bit of a mixed bag. Everybody has a day job, but we found that when we keep the contest focused, and we supply a data source. For example, right now we have one going where we supplied a Thanksgiving data set, and they're to build a Thanksgiving dashboard based off of that data set. We get more participation than if we say, the contest is to make a holiday dashboard. Iron Viz competitions. So we've hosted 2 Iron Viz competitions at Schwab, which it can get a little tricky because we have so many different locations, but we bring everybody together via WebEx. And Jared and I will actually co-host those competitions, and we usually get 3 or 4 contestants from around Schwab, and that gives them the opportunity to come be a part of the competition. And Jared and I will kind of split them off 2 and 2, and we'll meet in the months leading up to that competition to meet with them, learn about them, their department, their work experience. And then during the call, we use our instant messaging software to share screens with them, and then we can put one up on the WebEx at a time, and we talk about them and showcase them and talk about their strategy. So we're able to kind of pull that off over WebEx, and that's always a fun activity for our users. And one of the biggest and most important aspects is our survey. So we do a survey with a raffle, just like a lot of the companies you go and do business with these days. You get your receipt and they ask you to fill out the survey. Feedback is so important to us in the user group. We have surveys that we ask for a rating for our real world presentation, for the training that was provided. And we also allow kind of an open comment section where our users can request certain training that they might be looking for, or give us guidance on what they would like to see, and then we're able to line up training in accordance with our survey. And we give them an incentive, so we do a raffle that we're able to get from our Tableau partners and send them some Tableau swag for participating. And then we also leave some time at the end, usually for any Center of Excellence announcements, any server announcements, or anything that may be vital to our users, any updates that may be happening. We always have a lot of things happening with the COE. And so when we first started the Tableau user group, and there were about 250 users in 2016, we maybe got 40 or 50 monthly attendees. Currently, with over 750 developers, we have over 100 to 150 monthly attendees. So our user group is really growing, and we're excited to provide that value to everyone that's able to join. And we record all of our Tableau user group meetings, which is very beneficial. We have a page on our Schwab intranet where we post a recording of each call after it happens, and we catalog what the topics were, who was speaking during that call. And it's very handy in case someone has a conflict during the Tableau user group meeting and cannot attend, or even for our new users. A lot of times through the survey, some newer users with Tableau at Schwab, they might ask for certain training. Like recently we had a survey that asked for training on level of detail calculations, and we were able to point them on the recordings page to where we've provided that training before. And so it serves as a great resource for everyone to have those trainings and calls recorded. And so big thank you to all of our Tableau user group leaders from left to right. We have Chris, Will, Jason, Kelly, myself, Jared, Jessica, and Kyle. So these are the superheroes from our Tableau user group that keep it running. Also want to give a big thank you for support of our operational risk testing team, who's tuned in through the webcast today and used all these dashboards and perform all of that control testing. Thank you all for your support, and to our Tableau user group, because we have a lot of our user group tuned in today to see today's presentation. So since that feedback is important, please do go on the Tableau Conference mobile app and fill out the feedback for me for today's presentation. Apologies for some of the technical issues, but we made it through there. And it seems like everybody made it awake after lunch. So I consider that a success, and I appreciate everyone joining here today. Thank you.